All right, we are live doing another Facebook Live, and I'm so excited today that Dawnafe was willing to do this live chat with me. And so we're here at your office that I didn't even know existed in this spot. New places I'm learning about today.
Right. That's great. Happy to have you.
Thank you for being willing. It can be feel a little intimidating to be asked to talk about personal stuff, but you were willing, and it means a lot. So before we get into some of the grant and everything else, my name's Becky Montoya Wright, and I'm here with Dawnafe Whitesinger. And if you can just tell us a little bit about your family, the different roles you fill, a little bit about you.
Okay. Let's see. I'm married. I've been married for almost 25 years now. I always tease because it took my husband 8 years to ask me to marry him.
Wow.
And so he was super sure.
He was making positive. Nice.
And so I've been so lucky. We've had 2 boys. So when our boys are older, this is their first year in college, so this is the first year. And we have decided that we don't like the term empty nesters.
So they're not empty nesters.
Yes. So, we're trying to figure out new territory this year. And that in itself is, I can understand, I don't know, the turmoil that parents go through in trying to find your new space.
Getting that maybe a new, how you feel like you identify now that the kids aren't home.
Yeah. Or what type of mother to be to an adult child.
Oh.
To
To all of us with adult children.
That's really a hard one. And, being the supportive spouse for both of us, we're learning to be friends and friends in a different way because, we've been so fortunate and but it's just a different time in our life. It really is. And that's really like, oh my goodness, that's a life-changing thing. I've been fortunate to be able to be in our community for many years now. I've served as the Director of Instructional Programs at Distribuco Community School for over 20 years. And
say where that's at again?
Distribuco Community School.
Okay,
it's
brand new to me.
Okay. Yeah. So the school name is Distribuco.
Okay.
And that's kind of the tribal name for the community of Sibicu, meaning Red Valley.
Red Valley.
And so I've been there for many years. Right out of grad school, I started. And recently, I guess, in recent, time goes in a blink of an eye.
It sure does.
So about 12 years now as the county supervisor for District 5, which represents a majority of Pine Top Lakeside and then the White Mountain Apache tribe.
And that's kind of how I'm not sure what role you were in, but the way you became on my awareness is I often attend different community forums or trainings with mental health platforms, and at many of those I've been aware that you're in the room. Like we go around and we introduce ourselves and I'm like, oh, Dawnafa's here. And one of the more recent ones, I think we even ended up at the same table. I had junior high lunch duty, so I couldn't stay for the whole thing. I had to leave. So I didn't get a chance to talk to you that much then, but I just could tell that you have a passion for mental health, and that's something I'm passionate about. And I also knew you had influence in a lot of different areas in our community, and I was really excited that you were willing to visit with me.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. One thing we've had issue with on these Facebook Lives is I talk really loud, and I'm often with people who don't talk as loud, so project as much as you can. I think it kind of dials in to my loud voice, and then I'll try to talk softer, and we'll come to a middle ground. So today you were telling me you had a flat tire because you were attending another event today. I actually think people might be interested a little bit in the event you were at today, and then we'll get into this.
Okay. I was invited to attend, I guess, a small event where they were hosting at Eddie Vash's first store in, I think it's Chandler. And they have a collection of art that they were giving to the Heard Museum and another museum. But also part of that was Katie Hobbs, Governor Hobbs, was there to share the proclamation for Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's been something that's been so, I guess, important in our household. My son has worked a lot on the initiative, both at the state and national level. And so I was so grateful to be invited and to be able to hear those words. I think that when we think about the tribal communities who exist throughout Arizona and their significance, and even throughout our nation, I think we have some familiarity in a sense of the history that exists with tribal communities, and this kind of brings it to the forefront, where not only do we look for opportunity to learn about tribal communities, but we also gain, I guess, a deeper respect, and then there's opportunities to provide spaces for all voices. And so I really appreciate that about Indigenous Peoples Day. So that was part of my day, and that, there's a lot of things to that are so important to me. And growing up in the tribal community, and knowing the challenges that exist, and being able to highlight the positive and the resiliency that exists within our community, that's kind of like the period or the exclamation point. Like, it's part of the whole event of being able to acknowledge those things. So that was really nice.
Yeah, I love that you did that, and I love that we could bring it up. As far as picking today as the day we were visiting, it was just kind of a coincidence that it would happen to be this day, Indigenous Peoples Day. But I think it's really neat that you were able to attend that event, and I didn't want to gloss over that. One of my roles is as the junior high counselor for Blue Ridge, and a couple weeks ago, that fourth week of September, something that's more local to our community, White River, and you were saying kind of just the tribal holiday in general, is that some of those things are celebrated that fourth week in September. And so we had students at Blue Ridge who that whole week wore different, like one of the days was Rock Your Mocks.
Right.
And we didn't set that up. The kids that attend school in White River were celebrating it that way. And our kids at Blue Ridge were like, hey, we're going to rock our mocks. And I just thought it was so neat when you say spotlighting the positive. Our other kids that attend the school, they were in awe. Like you could tell they wished they had something kind of like, I don't know if wished is the right word, but you could tell there was a little bit of cultural envy. Like, that's so cool that they get to wear something with so much tradition and meaning to them. And then throughout the week, we saw other things. And so I think it is really important to have opportunities to really spotlight some of those positive things like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to attend that event, and that our school was able to enjoy seeing some of those things a couple weeks ago. So the reason we're meeting and having this chat is Blue Cross Blue Shield is funding a grant, and the grant is called Not All Wounds Are Visible. And that's what this shirt says, only to you it's all backward, because that's what this Facebook Live does. Flips everything. So the idea behind Not All Wounds Are Visible is just this idea that sometimes we are putting on the perfect face or acting like everything's okay, but we really might have things going on. In fact, we know in our county, a lot of people have a lot going on. Our suicide rates and our overdose rates are quite high in comparison to other counties. It's something that is really hitting our community hard in every demographic. And so this grant is to help bring attention to mental health, attention to resiliency, attention to strategies we can all be more aware of to help support each other and create safe places so that we can offer those supports. Thanks to my number one fan, Joyce Cox. Our moms are always the best.
Awesome.
This has been printed in flip so that you all can see these numbers. And we've got the medical hotline is 911, and then the mental health hotlines are 988. And so we want to push that information out. And I'll be giving Dawnafe a couple of these teal shirts that go with the grant, and a few of the bracelets as well, so that if she has opportunity to represent, she can do that too. We will be doing another Facebook Live with another parenting topic. That'll be on November 7th. And just by the way, tomorrow is October 10th. That is World Mental Health Day. And yeah, another really important day.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things that we're doing with the grant. Very appreciative to Blue Cross Blue Shield for funding this and helping us get this information out. All right, back to you, Dawnafe. So I gave you a little heads up that what we wanted to do is go through a personal challenge that you face that you're comfortable sharing with whoever might choose to watch. And then some ways that you've met that challenge, you know, some of the skills. So let's start with the personal challenge that you feel comfortable sharing.
When I was reading through that, all of these challenges come to mind where life is difficult. There's always going to be something that you're trying to overcome. And one of the things that did come to mind in being able to share, I guess, or looking at helping me to get to where I am now, is that there was a point where I wasn't a strong reader. You could even say that I wasn't, I don't know. I wouldn't go as far to say that I wasn't able to read, but I had to teach myself how to read in a way that I was able to learn. And I just remember, because my family moved around so much, and there was a time where I was in a school where I was identified as a second language learner, which was kind of interesting because my first language has been English. And my parents, they were native speakers, but I never learned either. My father is Navajo and my mother is White Mountain Apache. And I wasn't blessed to learn. And during that time, my father and I, we've had this conversation before, and my mother, about why they made that decision. And during that time, it was important for English to be spoken. And this was kind of something that was ingrained in a lot of tribal communities.
To kind of step aside from your native language
so
and
you
focus
could,
on English.
Yes. So you felt that you were giving your children an opportunity to grow and to be able to achieve and those kinds of things. And so my father was going to school and my mother was going to school, and so we moved different places. And that was kind of the start of being like identified as kind of different. And I never, I think it took me many, many, many years to recover from being identified as different. And when I had gone to high school, I had a family member who was living in Boston, and so my mom had sent me, my mom and dad, and I had went to live with my family in Boston. And they gave reading assignments out. And
about how old were you?
I was in 9th grade.
So 9th grade, you've moved around quite a bit at this point.
Yeah.
You're at a new school. Reading is really a challenge.
Reading is really a challenge.
And you're in Boston.
And I'm in Boston.
Okay.
And so I remember social studies. We were assigned, I think, like 25 pages to read. And I didn't know how in the world I was going to accomplish that. And it was, I think it was in 2 nights or something to that effect. And so what I did was I read, at that time I started reading out loud to myself. And I would read every word, and then I would take little notes, and then I would read out loud another paragraph, and I would take little notes. And I kept doing this over the course of, I don't know, it was several months, because I didn't feel comfortable of just like being able to read the text and the comprehension and so forth.
You were learning something about yourself, that if you read it aloud and heard it, that you were learning it for the first time, rather than just letting your eyes read the words. You needed to hear it.
I needed to hear it. And I didn't realize, I think a lot of things came together at that time, because I was so grateful to my social studies teacher, because he recognized that I was having a difficult time. And so he was, so kind and gracious in trying to help me get through that successfully. And I remember that I had taken a quiz I don't know, maybe like 3 months in or something to that effect. The first one, I failed, I bombed it, and then that particular quiz, I got 100. And he made a big deal out of it, he like announced it in class, everyone give Dawnafe Whitesinger, round of applause, and it was just kind of, and it's kind of silly, but I just think that kind of changed my value of myself, that I was capable, that, I can do this. I have an instructor who's believes in me, who is my support, somebody who doesn't know me, because we talked about this a little bit about our mothers, who are like our greatest
number one fans right there.
Yes, so we rely on our mothers, and not having kind of that outside like cheerleader or somebody else who's not related to you, who doesn't know you, who's like,
right.
And for me, you like that challenge of always being identified as different, as being the native girl. Because even when I had gone to Boston, I was the only native student in the entire school. So it was a big deal to everybody else around me.
Yeah.
But to me, it was scary. And, and I felt like a magnifying glass was on me too.
I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, when you said Boston, I was not expecting Boston to be part of the story. What just even you take any kid and move them to faraway places, that's going to be challenging. And you add a few other dynamics to that, and there's some super challenges there.
Yeah.
And to have the instructor, I love that she's bringing up to have someone who believed in her. Because I think when we start to talk about this power that we have, to be that for other people, it really does come down to those opportunities. As an educator, well, I'm not really an educator, but I work in education.
Yeah.
We know that young people often are a lot more, they're not as interested in what's being taught to them as they are in knowing that instructor cares about them. And by you knowing that he cared, how great that he celebrated the 100% and made such a big deal.
And I think it really changed. Like, I struggled going to college in a sense of like, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to accomplish in life? And I had always had, and I had come back eventually, and I graduated from LGSA, and there were many people who were very kind and supportive, and having that instruction and education and people who were your cheerleaders really kind of changed my perspective. And when we look at tribal communities, there are a lot of challenges like rural communities or circumstances across the nation. And how do you become part of the positive influence and being able to change what that looks like? And I think it took a lot for me to change my belief in myself. And so I always thought about young people and who might not have that encouragement, or who might not have that strength, or who might not ever find that they're capable of doing something. So how do you become part of the solution in creating opportunities for young people to be able to see, I guess, their strengths, and being able to explore some of those things that they desire to do in life, and how do you create the structures to be able to support them? And I really struggled with finding what that challenge is, because one of the other things that we talked about a little before we started was just how hard it is to be a woman. And
we're both looking in here going like, are we okay? Is the light bright enough?
Am I okay? And, and I think aesthetics, and then getting older, your place kind of changes, or the way that, I don't know, there are just so many dynamics to who I am that I have always had to, I don't know, find that I'm capable, that I'm deserving of that space, that, that I'm just as capable as everybody else in that particular space. And so it's that even when you're Indigenous, and that's for me specifically, and it might not be for every Indigenous person, I think that's just something that I have struggled with.
I love that you bring that up, because So she just said that she's clarifying that this is a truth for her, and she's not going to paint that over everybody, that it's her truth. And I in my last visit, it was with Josh Beeler. We had talked about he had gone to his high school in Winslow. I don't know if you knew that about him, or junior high, maybe it was junior high. And just the cultural diversity that experience was for him. And then as adults, professionally, or in our education, we often are required to take a multicultural class as part of our studies. And those are so great and helpful. But I also think at the end of the day, we each kind of show up as we are. And I think people really appreciate when we haven't painted the brush too generally about, hey, I took a class and I know everything about your culture or whatever it might be.
I am totally sensitive right now to everything.
Yeah, I know it all. I'm so woke. I am so, So I love that you bring it, that you've got some truths that apply to you, but you certainly wouldn't push those out on everybody else.
No.
And I think that's so important. That's how people feel seen and heard, is when we speak our truth, we speak our lived experience, and then we listen to theirs, and we learn what theirs is.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's so true. I mean, I think serving young people, that you begin to understand the human dynamic, that everybody is uniquely created.
Yes.
Young people, they're going to tell you that they're unique. They're going to remind you that they're unique. Although they try to be able to create these little pods of similarity, in a sense, when we look at them individually, they all come with their own little gifts,
and they want that.
Yeah.
If you want to offend most young people, you tell them they're so typical. Oh, you're so typical. You're just like a typical teenager, and then they have turned off all listening. They're done. They're not interested anymore. If that's, they want to be seen for the individual that they are. One thing I wanted to address for people who don't know, when Dawnafe said she graduated from, I'll just say that is the high school in White River.
Yes.
Some people may not know that, so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
We know that in our community because it's kind of part of our community.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe most people in Navajo County would know that. I think so. Maybe.
Yeah. A long time ago.
Yeah. So that experience in Boston was a big game changer, and you found the ability, you dialed in, you had this teacher that was really supporting you, huge, but you also were learning something about yourself. You were learning that to read and to have comprehension, you needed to do it a different way. And then was that something that just stuck and was able to fuel and offer you a platform towards learning down the road?
Definitely. I think it really made me, you self-assess, and you're thinking about, because there are things that you approach in life that you feel like you have no idea how you're going to get to the next step. And it's always about those little baby steps of, okay, what can I control in this circumstance? Because you can't control everything, but trying to figure out the things that you can control really help you to be able to accomplish the next step. And I think when I think about the struggles that I went through and just being, studying and learning how to study and how to educate myself, that those were the things that I could control. Because I could have said, well, I have no control over this. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to be responsible. I don't know how to do this, and had given up. But I think, the hard work, because it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me to admit that I had a weakness.
Because we're so good at I can do this, and we don't ask for help.
Right. It's that mask. It's the not only we don't want people to know that there's a part of us that might need some help.
Might need some help.
Yeah.
And so I think that from learning from that, all of those things became part of that. And being a better learner, being a better advocate for myself, paying attention to myself in a way that, do I understand the things that I can control? Because there are times where, you approach something and you feel like this is monumental. I will never be able to get over this. And so we can live in that space, and we can like almost die in that space.
Absolutely.
And we would never be, I don't know, able to like get to the good stuff, to be able to feel, even though there's hard work ahead, it's the accomplishment of being able to get to that point that you need to get to achieve or learn or to grow, you know, all those things. All the things that we talk about, in a sense, when we tell young people that the challenge of life is the part where you're growing, and this is something that we all go through. And I think that reminder of we all grow through this, because there are times where you feel like you're the only person in the world who's going through what you're going through.
Well, would you agree or disagree that when you've met people in your life that you meet them and something clicks and you just hold them in high regard and you just know there's something amazing about them, and then you learn their story? Yeah. And I guess my truth is that I've never learned, when I find someone who holds that space for me, once I learn their story, it's usually a pretty loaded story. Like they didn't have this cakewalk, easy breezy thing happen to them. They've had part of what's made them the person that I'm admiring and holding in such high regard are the challenges and the things that they've overcome. And so those very opportunities, I know when I sit with people, sometimes they're sharing really big things that I think, sometimes I even personally think, how can this possibly have a good outcome for them? And I am usually overcome with a strong feeling that the potential that those challenges have to positively thrust this person forward are just as legitimate as the potential to derail them. And the potential is there either way. And maybe they get derailed for a little bit, but then they're able to find their trajectory in a forward way. And it's because of those challenges.
That's so true.
And it just wouldn't even be an opportunity otherwise.
And I love those stories.
Me too.
Like, you know, connecting with somebody and hearing their story and hearing their truth and knowing how much they struggle to be able to get where they are. Because I think even like the small story, and you know, I'm thinking, okay, what is a challenge? But in the big, I guess, in thinking about how I felt at that time, I felt stupid, I felt lonely, I felt unheard, I felt all of these like negative things that just felt monumental. And how do you overcome those things? And being able to hear people's stories are a strength. You know, I think of it's a small story in our family, but my grandfather was a rancher, and he was out with the cattle, and it started raining, and it got pitch dark, and he couldn't see. And so he told his horse to lead him to somewhere safe. So his horse led him to a cave. So he spent the night in that cave. And so I guess while he was there, he had carved his name, or he had written it somehow. I have no idea. Years later, my uncle had the same experience. And it was raining, it was dark, there was no way he could find his way home. So he told his horse, you know, lead me to somewhere safe. So the horse led him to that same cave, and he laid there, and in the morning he had seen his father's name.
Wow. And
I just think, you know, what they had to go through and the struggle to feel safe. Like, I could not imagine being out in the dark and just having the faith that everything is going to be okay. I couldn't imagine it. And so having faith that our Creator is going to take care of you. And then this connection to your own father's story. I just, when I remember my mom telling me that story, and I was
so touched in thinking about, one, the faith that they had, and then also being able to overcome something that was really challenging, because I just, I think of myself like out here in the dark. I can walk to my car and in the 2 minutes or a minute or whatever, I know that I'm going to get to my car, but it might be a little dark and it might be a little leery,
Right.
But I'm not going to spend the night out there.
And to find refuge in a cave, when a cave is your refuge, man,
Yes.
that's a scary time.
Yeah.
But I like that you brought up how meaningful, so the story is meaningful in so many ways. Meaningful for your grandpa, meaningful again for your uncle, and then you learning of that story and how much meaning it brought to you. It reminds me, in my family, we have different, people who've written down their histories of their story, like ancestors that have written, or people have written it for them. And these people they've died a long time ago, way before I was even born. And my mother gave me a few of those histories, and reading and connecting with people that are my relatives and hearing about their triumphs and their marriages. And a lot of them had children that died young, because that was kind of a more common, and the heartache, and then getting to the end of their stories and feeling this powerful emotion of knowing the person I've been reading about is about to die. And they've actually died a long time ago, and just feeling that emotion, it's so important. And when we talk about resiliency and the things that strengthen us, I think you hit two big ones: our Creator, that higher power, the sense of something bigger than us, and the power of our relatives and our ancestors, and the strength we can draw from them. Those are huge.
That is so, and I didn't think of that. I think of it on a daily, probably, that I don't even know. My grandmother, she's such a big part of my life, and we lost her a couple of years ago, and she was 97.
Wow.
And there are so many parts of her life that left, a legacy for the way that we live our lives. And she had 13 children, and many of them died either at birth or as infants. And later on, she had a lot of her children left, and they went to school in what they called a placement program.
Where they pulled them off of the rereservations and placed them in other communities.
And they were not together, they were in separate homes. Mm-hmm. And I just, like I was saying, I'm going through this strange transition in my life right now with my children being gone, and trying to figure out what that looks like. And I think about my grandma, and she had to do that every year, letting her children go. And I just, I don't know how she did that. I don't know how.
Because
she
they
just
would
had the
come
faith.
home for like the summers.
They would come home for the summer, and not all of them would. But she had at least that opportunity for them to come home over the summer. And just the faith, I guess, to be able to support her children in that way. Because I almost feel like, and that's a whole different story in a sense of the decisions that are made. And with tribal communities, it was different then. And so in thinking about and she was very young when she got married, and that my grandfather and her, they had to ride a wagon down to Globe to get married. Wow. And she was so young that they eloped. And so I think of the struggle of even just being young and being connected to somebody so much that you wanted to be a part of their life, and having to be committed to it. And this wagon ride, and it's not just where you drive down to the courthouse.
That's some serious commitment of time and effort.
And there are so many things. My grandmother, she was born 2 years after Fort Apache was closed, and the intention of Fort Apache, was this assimilation, or during that time we were talking about, dismantling tribes and so forth. So that history, and being so close to that history, and her not being able to vote, that she wasn't a citizen, and how did that impact her life?
Yeah.
And so all of those things have been a tremendous impact to my life, and how I talk to my children, and how I guess just maneuver in the world. And that's so right. The ancestors, our ancestors, and the things that they've done for us, and the sacrifices they've made, and the stories that they leave us, and the legacy that they try to leave. So important to our identity.
So important. And I would encourage people, if they're thinking of ways they can support themselves or their children, to consider how they might find some of those stories and be willing to share some of those stories. It's a game changer. It does give us identity and purpose and connection. And I think that could be a really powerful thing to do. I'm going to read our screen real quick.
Yeah.
Hang on. Oh, good. People are hearing it, and we've got an I know the feeling from one of the people that are watching.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I love that.
Great.
I always worry that partway through I'm going to find out nobody can hear what we're saying and be like, oh. Yeah. So good. We're on target. Something you mentioned a bit ago, we kind of addressed it before, and then we got into it again, is the stressors of being women, and then we can add some of our other identifier, things that identify us. And I was curious when you said that in the school setting, I heightened my own awareness to this tendency that I had. And I want to throw it out there, and you can tell me what you think. So in the school setting, I really noticed, and I'm generalizing. I'm not saying everybody does this in the school setting or anywhere else, but I found this to be true for myself. In the school setting, I found that I often gave the boys a pass. Like if they were being naughty or breaking a rule, that I would even say something like, well, boys will be boys. Mm-hmm. But that I held girls at this very high social expectation, that I expected them to bring more maturity to the game, and that I expected them to be the ones that were conflict resolution focused. And I realized this probably about 8 years ago. And I really wanted to I felt like this is a disservice to the boys, because I'm not helping them raise the bar. And it's really putting more on women than, from a younger age than really seems reasonable. I was just curious, do you think there's some truths to that we kind of may be wired or designed to kind of give the boys a pass, but really expect the women to carry us all a little bit?
I think so. I think so. And there are so many layers to that. So I think of like tribal perspective. I grew up in a family where the women were the head of the household in a sense. They were raising their families. They were having the jobs. They were trying to make everything happen and being the support system. And I think that I still see that trend. And so it's become just kind of my knowing of the world.
Right.
That this is kind of how we operate. But I think that when we think about women in general in our communities, and it's kind of interesting because it's like this oxymoron that exists. So we hold women to a higher standard in the sense of that their conduct and so forth.
Yes.
But when we think about decision makers, or we think about like leaders and so forth, well, okay, we will put you in a leadership role, and this is not always the case. And so women have to advocate on a different type of level for them to be leaders. And so this, this contradiction exists. And so I don't know why that is such a big part of our community. And it probably has a lot to do with how we speak to our girls. And, even thinking about growing up, when my family left, and I lived with my cousins and my mom and my dad. So we had a large household. And I remember that they would go somewhere, and it was always the girls that were in charge. They never left the boys in charge. They never left the boys in charge.
Well, maybe the brain research, I'm not trying, this is certainly not as dissing, but maybe the brain research supports it a tad, because we do know that women the frontal lobe has more neural connections to the right and left hemisphere at a younger age than the boys, generally speaking. So that maybe contributes to it, but I do think that's something to think about. I'm sure that all of that influenced you when raising your own children, as far as having that heightened to your awareness, so that you could know moving forward with your own children how you wanted, what you wanted to at least give them as an opportunity of their perception of society and of men and of women and things like that.
So. And I think it's a hard balance, and I think that's probably a unique thing for every household. However they look at this balance of man and women within their home or families, that, not all of us have, I guess, a husband and wife household.
Yes.
But when we think about like how people perceive our space in the world, as a woman, as a man, you walk in a room and people already have a role for you, and they know nothing about you. And this is kind of something that I have noticed and recognized, and I've had to put myself in where I'm capable, that I belong here, that I belong at this decision-making table, or I belong in this room, or whatever it is, and not trying to fight for your space. And it's not even a fight. I think that's a completely wrong word, but that role that is already automatically given to us, or to me, and I don't want to put that on you. Like, I feel that when you go into a room, people have already identify you as a particular way. And so how do you become your own self and not falling into whatever assumptions that might be?
Assumptions. Yeah. They're no good. We all have to do better at stepping back from assumptions, because the irony in this is sometimes as women, we are the worst to each other.
Yes.
Like, we might see, that whole idea of someone walking in the room, we might be the one making those assumptions of, like whatever our little head, our mind is going through in that moment of just being critical or whatever. Sometimes we feel like we lift ourselves up by thinking negatively or tearing others down, and there's no truth in that. It's been very empowering to me. I work in a front office with women who are so good to women, and I love that. Like, there is no hesitation for any of the women I work with to speak to how beautiful other women are physically and emotionally, and like, just that they're smart, that they're intelligent, that they're capable. And there's just so much generosity in my front office from all of the women that run that office towards other women. And that has not been my experience always. Sometimes when I've worked in an office with people in general, but often with women, there can be more of this critical energy and this threatening vibe of, oh, there's someone, does she think she's going to be the alpha in this office? I don't think so, whatever. Yeah. And I love my junior high front office. Shout out to the junior high front office.
Awesome. I
know, working in education is very tricky, but when you have the intrinsic reward of working with the people that I happen to get to work with, and a huge part of that is the generosity, the kindness, the compassion that they have that we all have for each other, and that generally we throw out to everybody else. I love it. It's contagious. Things that used to be a weakness for me have been modeled in that office by other women, and I'm like, yeah, why would I be petty about that? Look at how good it feels to speak so positively about other people that way. I want to be a part of that.
That's so true. I have a small group of friends, and we're all unique in all of our ways. And I always feel empowered by them to be closer to the woman that I want to be. We have these ideas and so forth, and there's always the struggle of just being a woman.
Yes, sure.
How do I look today? How am I talking today? Was I kind enough today? Was I not too grouchy? Was I, all these kinds of things. And so these women, in the way that they live their lives and the way that they have, their own personal businesses or whatever it might be, that it's just so enriching to me. And the way that they talk to each other, encourage each other, be their strength to one another. And I think that's so important that we find those spaces to be able to feel that, because I have been in those kinds of other spaces.
Yes.
And it really, it almost becomes, you identify, like, I don't know, it brings out your weaknesses, where you're, oh, maybe I am like that, or maybe I'm, or maybe you didn't say something as kind as you should have, or whatever it is. And I'm always, I try to be self-reflective. I won't say always. I try to be, because I have been in those circumstances where I have been treated very badly. And so I don't want to be in that position where someone says, oh, Dawnafe treated me really badly, and whatever the situation is. And so as women, how do we do that better? How do we encourage each other, empower each other, lift each other up? There are so many things. So when you say that, I think of, these group of women.
Yeah, and you said that when you're done spending time with them, you feel this sense of wanting to be a better version of yourself. And I think that's a really great read. You don't come away thinking, oh, I don't measure up, or da-da-da. You come away thinking, wow, I want to be even more. Like, these women make me feel good about who I am and make me even want to be more. And that's probably because I don't know which women you're talking about, but when we find ourselves in circles of people who err on the side of loving too much, that's the greatest side to err on. If you're going to be around people who aren't sure where to dial in that love, be around the ones who decide to err on the side of just being really generous with it. And that's going to give us that feeling, because those assumptions, people who want to offer love, kindness, and compassion, they're interested in our lived experiences. They're not bringing their opinions and their harsh notions to the table. They're there to invest in us and vice versa. And it's a beautiful thing.
It really is.
Feeling seen and heard, it's a big deal.
So I think of young people. We always are telling young people, find good friends. Find people who are supporting you, who are encouraging you. And it's almost, I guess, what you needed to learn, what is it? You needed to learn in kindergarten will
follow you till you learn it.
Yes, follow you for your life. I can't remember the saying, but that's one of those things. Surround yourself with good people. And I was not always good at doing that. I was not, and I would find myself falling into those situations where I felt bad about myself, or I felt like, and I was questioning everything that I did. And those are not opportunities for growth. It doesn't allow us to be able to flourish and to add something to our communities or to our world, or to be the mom that we want to be, or the wife that we want to be, or the friend, or and so forth.
The different roles that we fill.
Yeah.
And I think I know a common thread in junior high, and I think you talked about the kindergarten quote. We say in junior, at the junior high, things that you don't figure out in junior high, you're gonna just keep having to try to figure out. If you figure it out here, it really can be a platform for helping you out down the road. But it's common that I'll work with young people who feel like maybe there's a group of 4 friends, and throughout the year, one by one, they'll stop by to let me know no one else in the group is interested in who they are or what they're about. And yet I know all 4 people in the group really do care genuinely for each other.
Yeah.
They just haven't developed those skills yet. And so sometimes it's a matter of developing those skills to be better listeners, non-judgmental, and it's not even about being non-judgmental. Sometimes we just get talked over all the time and we just don't get heard.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It is a skill. I certainly don't want to encourage people, hey, just write off the people in your life that don't make you feel good.
No.
But bring that awareness, that understanding, and certainly dial in those people like the group of friends you're talking about, where when you're with them, you really feel good about who you are right then and there. They're meeting you where you're at, but you certainly feel motivated to even become more. Those are the kind of friends that really get you down some great paths towards personal development and all of those things that we hope to achieve, and especially when we're going through hard times as well.
Yes.
Well, I love the thoughts you've shared. we've talked a little bit about, the resiliency that we can find in recognizing what we have in control, what's in our control. That's a big deal. You said you realized that during your time in Boston, starting to take charge. Here's what I have charge over. That's a big deal. Honing in on that. And then trying new things. You tried new ways of conquering something that wasn't working for you, and you had some success. And then you had supports. You were around the right people who supported you in that. And then it sounds like that just was carried on throughout your life. We've talked about a higher power, believing in something bigger than ourselves, spiritual powers that come from that, ancestors, some good stuff there.
Yes.
I wanted to just get your thoughts on what's going on in our community as far as the suicides, the overdose, and some of the reckless behaviors that are happening. Do you have any thoughts or particular concerns on that you wanted to share any thoughts on? Or
Well, I think as a community member, I have tremendous concerns because we want our communities to be healthy. We want, I believe that you have strong families. It creates one strong individual, creates a strong family, which creates a strong community, which creates a strong nation. So when we think about that one individual who might be struggling, how do we create a support system for them? And oftentimes when we think about like the numbers, it might feel overwhelming.
yes,
And so you feel like, well, where do we even start? And from the I guess Navajo County, that we recently did a study on the statistics that are impacting the challenges and circumstances that are impacting our community. And you talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And so when I first read that, I was saddened because I know that it impacts so many of our young people. And how do we create, and so I'm thinking, well, how do we create those strong support structures? And one of those things that stood out that you didn't mention was the sexual activity that exists within our community.
Yes.
And we have like one of the highest numbers of syphilis within the state of Arizona. And so what does that mean? What is that saying about, one, how are we talking about young people, about sexual activity?
Yes.
Respecting our bodies. What does that mean? How do we value having personal value for ourselves? There are so many things tied to that. And so as community members, it's almost that extension of this small group that I was telling you about, that we become responsible for everybody. We shouldn't, I don't know, and not that in a way where you feel like, okay, I got to help you and so forth, but responsibility comes where we are encouraging, that we offer a kindness to people, that we leave our judgments home, that we really work to be able to create an environment that we would want to be in if we're struggling. Because there are times where we all struggle,
that we need help with overcoming a challenge, I know that many in our community struggle with addiction.
Addictions.
How do we, yes. And so this conversation of meth and...
you think of how they're all so linked.
Yes.
Because you talk about the sexual activity, we talk about addiction, mental wellness, overdose, suicide. Like there's just so much linkage to all of those things and what precipitates the other. We know that homelessness is also people not being able to have a residence of their own is also a big concern in our county. So there's so many things that just kind of come together. And it is important conversations.
Very important conversation. And I think that, it's kind of interesting because I almost had this similar conversation earlier this week in talking about Maslow's hierarchy.
Yes.
So when we think about Maslow's hierarchy, there are, I think, 4 levels. But with all of these issues, all of our community is at that
basic level.
Basic
needs.
And so when we think about basic needs of creating a safe environment, of feeling like you are fed and you have all of these things, and then the next level is feeling loved. So we are not to the level of feeling loved. And why that's so important is because the top pinnacle is self-actualization. So what is self-actualization? That's where you see yourself as a contributor to the world. That's where you see yourself as important in a family network. That's where you see yourself important in being able to achieve your goals and so forth. And so when we think about unhealthy communities, it really is very concerning when we think about the large numbers that are at that basic needs
that aren't even having those basic needs met.
Yeah.
And when you're hungry all the time, it's just hard to think about who cares about math?
Yeah.
Who cares about, reading, even if you're starving and you don't have a warm place to sleep?
Yes.
And then, like you said, how are we ever going to get to that self-actualization? I love that you brought that up. So from that, I would say if you are interested in helping support the community, find out the programs and the opportunities that you have to start building that basic level in our community. And I love the ideas that you've shared about, and do it without judgment. Like, we all have our struggles and we all have things going on. Sometimes it's generations deep that they've been dealing with poverty. And so I know a lot of times we want to hold people accountable. Well, if only you would this, or only you would that. Let's leave all of that at the door and just start to see people where they're at and explore support mechanisms that we can put in place right where they're at. And if there's something that needs to be transparent, it'll become transparent in that process. But otherwise, we might really find opportunities to build the community in ways that we just didn't even know existed. I love it. I'm so glad we have been chatting. We've almost been chatting for an hour. You thought it was going to be hard.
I did.
I know. I told her that we'll cut it at an hour, and she's like, will we really talk an hour? I'm like, I bet we could. We'll see how it goes. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up? I'm going to throw out the support lines and stuff one more time, but do you have any questions for me or any other thoughts that you want to make sure we hit before we wrap things up?
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It was, and I was nervous. I was, so I'm grateful that, we worked through that, and it was a lot of good conversation. And I think that when we think about our role and responsibility to community, we can start with ourselves. We don't have to try to volunteer or so forth. How do we start making ourselves better? How do we start making ourselves healthy? And that's a difficult journey. How do we ask for help if we need counseling support, or if we need substance abuse support? All of these things, they're all very challenging. So, and they're not small things. So being able to encourage one another and support one another is so important.
It is really important. And I think sometimes we can get lost in great big efforts that seem like great big movements going on. One that's been on my mind lately is just there's been a lot of attention on child trafficking. And I think it would be really eye-opening to people in our community, especially since we're talking about sexual activity, that there are opportunities for young people in our community that live in Navajo County to create profiles on different sites that are supposed to be for adults, but they can create that profile even as a young person, and often they are then ending up in situations where they are in dangerous situations with local people, and even in situations where sexual activity is being exchanged for money. And so we can get caught up in these big movements of things going on with that and not realize things like that are going on in our own community. And there are efforts we can take right here regarding all of these things that we've talked about to heighten our awareness, to increase our noticing skills, to ask hard questions, and to be generous with our love and support. A huge thank you. I'm going to leave you a couple shirts and bracelets. I want to just push out one more time that in the community, if you're having a medical crisis or you suspect that somebody has overdosed, dial 911. There are Good Samaritan laws in the state of Arizona that will protect you. If you think, oh, but this person who I think overdosed is a minor, and if I call the police, they could get in trouble, I could get in trouble, dial 911. Those laws are going to protect you when your efforts are to save someone's life. Dial 911, and let's be proactive on that. For mental health, the hotline used to be a 10-digit number, and now it's only 3 digits, 988. And if you dial 988, then hopefully they will get you linked up with some supports here in our county, and within a pretty short time frame. I have been told that dialing 988 will sometimes put you on hold for just a bit, but I just want to push that number out there. You can text or dial it, and it at least gets the wheels turning. And these are numbers, this 988, you can call that if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, or if you're supporting somebody else who is experiencing a mental health crisis and you need to know, what do I do next? So just remember those numbers. They're straightforward. I think most people have 911 memorized, and the 988 is super easy to just keep memorized as well, because it's very similar. I'm not sure who I'll be visiting with in November. I have a couple of ideas. So hopefully I will be pushing out some information to share who that will be in the next few weeks. And just one more reminder that tomorrow is World Mental Health Day. And so just consider how your words and actions could start lifting the stigmas surrounding mental health, so that we can create safer places where people reach out to get the supports that they need. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Oops, I always try to